All right. All right. This open meeting of the Northborough Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's.
Just a minute, Ashley.
Oh, I didn't introduce myself either, so. All right.
I just want to mute this
All right. Okay.
and. Okay,
All right. So I'm Ashley Davies, Chair of the Northborough Master Plan Implementation Committee. This open meeting of the Northborough Master Plan Implementation Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the Master Plan Implementation Committee are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the Master Plan Implementation Committee to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Amy Bretsky.
Here.
Rick Leaf.
Here.
Dario Damari.
Here.
Millie Milton.
Here.
John Campbell.
Here.
Jean Kennedy. And Ashley Davies here. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Fred Litchfield.
here.
Lori Connors.
Here.
All right.
What
let's
happened? What
get
happened to Fran? She was here a minute ago.
She was, and then she disappeared.
Hopefully she'll get back in.
She's
Yeah.
coming. She jumped out for a second, but she's joining
Okay.
back in. There you go.
Oh, great.
Fran, you with us?
You're muted.
She's on mute.
Because you may be having some connectivity issues. Well, it looks like she'll get back in. So today we're going to start off the agenda by welcoming Lori Connors, our new town planner. Lori, we're happy to have you here. And I've had the pleasure of getting to talk to Lori a few times now and learn about some of the great work she did in Millbury with their downtown planning and revitalization work. So Lori, do you want to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your experience with what we're kind of dealing with and any thoughts on our plan to move forward?
Sure. So I'm happy to be with you all this evening. My first day in the town of Northborough was last Monday, so I'm just getting my feet wet and trying to figure out about your regulations and where you stand on all the various planning initiatives. So I was very excited to hear about your downtown initiative. Millbury, I worked for the town of Millbury for 16 years, so also a long timer there. And we were on a similar track. So we completed our master plan in 2019. And just a couple of years prior to that, we had done our visioning exercise for downtown revitalization. So one of the driving forces for that was we had a little pocket park in our downtown that was very dilapidated. And we were also suffering from a number of empty storefronts. So we started a couple of years before that with the Downtown Beautification Initiative. And the goal of that initiative was to identify low cost, easy to implement measures to improve the look and feel of our downtown. So the first two initiatives we started out with was an Adopt a Pot program and an Adopt a Banner program, and they were very successful. And we were able to raise quite a bit of money. And then we wanted to expand that effort. So we were able to get a technical assistance grant which enabled us to hire a consultant team that consisted of the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission, the Blackstone River Coalition, Mass Audubon, and then we had Weston and Sampson as our consulting engineer, and gosh, another engineering group that has just left my brain, so I can't think of the name. I'm sure it'll come to me in a minute. And so we did a series of 4 visioning sessions, which really, one of the goals is that we really wanted to have green in our downtown. And by we, I mean my little group of ladies. There were 4 of us. And the DPW director wanted to think of ways that we could get trees into our downtown and could also beautify our commons. So that little pocket park and our town common. So that's kind of the launching pad. And so low impact development, which is kind of like using nature to control drainage, was a really big aspect of our visioning process. So at the end of those 4 visioning sessions, we had a plan. So it was kind of a similar effort to what you're going through now, where we defined our downtown and then we came up with a plan that pretty much covered the entire downtown with improvements. So then we took that and identified a phase 1 scope. And we got some grant money and we used some municipal funds and we hired Weston and Sampson to do a design. That ended up costing about $150,000 to do the phase 1 design. And then I was able to secure 5 different grants, which totaled about 1.5 million for the construction of phase 1. So the total construction cost was $2.3 million. So a good portion of that was paid for with grants. So we completed that phase 1 construction about a year ago. And then we started doing the design for phase 2. And thankfully for phase 2, I was able to get mostly paid for with grant funds. There was a little bit of matching money that the town had to put in. And we were able to secure almost 1.9 million in grant money using 4 different grants for phase 2 construction. Just got the bids last week. Unfortunately, they came in over budget. So now they're trying to figure out whether they need to adjust down the scope of the construction project or put in some town money to pay for that. So I have quite a bit of experience with downtown revitalization. So the good news is that you can learn from some of the things that went really well in Millbury, as well as the things that could have gone better and I learned from. So I'm excited to help you folks through this process and certainly learn from you about what your priorities are and what you hope to accomplish with this downtown revitalization.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And and I know you have great maps that you've shown us, and it was just really interesting just for everyone else. When I saw Lori's maps from Millbury, it was really striking some of the things that they had done that really echo what we are hoping to see in our downtown. So I think it's really exciting to have her on board and helping us through this process. That being said, I think at this point we were going to get a little bit of an update on where we're at with moving forward on our downtown master plan and the RFP. I don't know, Lori, if you had any updates on that since John isn't here. Did you know where we're at in that process?
Yeah, so John had given me the VHB memorandum so that it encompassed the scope of work. And he asked me to review it and asked me if I had any comments. And I did speak with you. The only suggestion that I had is that I noticed that this only included 2 visioning sessions. And my recommendation, as you know, as I explained, we had 4 visioning sessions. And I do think that 4 visioning sessions were too many. But I thought that 2 visioning sessions are probably too few. Because in our experience, there was quite a few changes that came out of our second meeting with our consulting team. So the first meeting was pretty much, we were just kind of brainstorming ideas, and we were coloring on maps and identifying linkages and, you know, where improvements had to be made. I'm sorry, I have some very affectionate pets that keep coming up to me and distracting me. So I'm not sure if you notice.
Oh.
Mhm.
So hopefully my dog won't start barking, but they're pretty much all over me all the time. So bear with me.
It's great.
But anyway, so the second meeting, the consultant team presented their ideas for what they thought made sense for the downtown. And then we kind of broke those ideas apart and suggested changes. So some things the folks who attended the visioning workshops saw they really liked, but then other things they weren't too crazy about. So the third session enabled the consultant team to come back after the feedback was given by the attendees of the visioning session. So that was my one suggestion. I just thought that 2 might be too little. And another suggestion that I have is to really involve the property owners and the business owners within your focus area, because they're really important for the buy-in. So of course, you know, this will take care of the public realm, but then their responsibility is taking care of the private realm. So you want to make sure that they're on board with the plan, and also that they feel like they've had a say. And it tends to get them really excited. So the positive in the Millbury scenario is that over the course of the last 2 years, a number of the property owners and the business owners have made some really great facade improvements. We've had some exciting new businesses go into downtown, and they're installing beautiful signage and even some of the open spaces. Like there was this one storefront in particular that had like built-in planters into their storefront, which always just used to be dirt. And so now they put flowers in. So they have caught on to like our Adopt a Pot program. And that has encouraged the folks to look around to see what little open spaces exist in the downtown and to improve those areas and to put out their own pots. So just a little idea that I have about, you know, really getting more buy-in.
Yeah, that's great. And I don't think we need to give any more approval on that scope of work. I think you just make that change and move forward once the appropriation is approved for that. But I had a question about the visioning sessions. So are the visioning sessions just a general open to the public sort of thing, or is that something that you really send invitations to people for those? So it's a smaller group. I just wasn't sure how that.
It was a combination. So what we did for our visioning exercise is that we targeted our downtown business owners and our downtown businesses with flyers that were like specific for them. So we either went door to door. Like I like to do that with the business owners. So I go and I introduce myself and I hand them the flyer and I personally invite them to the visioning session. So that tends to be really effective when they see a face. And then there was the other outreach. So of course there are your typical movers and shakers that attend everything. So, you know, I would send it to the Board of Selectmen, you know, the planning board, pretty much everybody who is here that is represented on other committees, the historical commission. So all of those folks, I put an ad in the newspaper. I put in an ad on the cable access, something on the website. So wherever you can advertise, because you want as many people as possible. And after you do all of that, you'll be lucky if you get 40 people in the room. So it's a lot of work, but at least you can say, well, hey, I invited you to participate. And whether they choose not to participate or to participate, that's up to them. But at least nobody can say that they weren't invited.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. And then, okay, so that makes sense. So you get public input on the first one, as many people as you can hopefully see there. You hope that same group of people attends the second to see what came of it, what came of all of their input. And then you have a third where you can adopt the additional feedback you got on the second.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So the third
Okay.
is like the final presentation. So this is the vision.
Okay.
And,
Right.
you know, if you do the 3 sessions, then you also have time to talk about some of the material features. Like we had talked about seating and we talked about like crosswalk design and pavers and, you know, landscaping ideas. We actually have an archway. One of the problems that we have in Millbury is that we have a municipal parking lot. Nobody knows where it is because it's not well signed. And so we ended up putting this giant archway that says municipal parking. So it's like this black metal feature, and then it has gold lettering. Nobody can miss this. So now everybody knows, oh, okay, that's the entrance to the municipal parking lot. So what was really important to us is we wanted more people to use the municipal parking lot so that they would walk to the businesses. And while they were walking to the business that they wanted to go to, they would visit other businesses on the way.
Okay. Yeah, you know, Amy had mentioned today that the selectmen were getting some calls about fencing for the new Assabet Park. And, you know, this is obviously not lining up with that in terms of time frame, but that would be probably a time to talk about, you know, something like that, fencing styles and things like that. Okay.
Exactly. So that just kind of, so the visioning boards fed into our design for the phase 1. So what we did is we took this piece out of the phase 1, out of the visioning exercise, and I use that for the grant applications to help pay for the design. So they need like a concept in order for you to be able to secure a design grant. So I don't know if the goal here is to use like CPA money or ARPA funds or whatever. But it is hard to get that initial grant. So you need something solid to show them. And they also like to see that you have involved the public. An important aspect is to target the housing authority, because they want to see, because usually that's a population that isn't included in visioning exercises. So they want to see that the housing authority, the folks who live there have been able to contribute to the conversation.
So I guess, Lori, my understanding is that you're recommending that the scope, as it was agreed to by the committee at their last meeting, you recommend modifying it to include 3 visioning sessions as opposed to 2, and also to maybe add a little more verbiage in there to emphasize the involvement of business owners in the area to be involved in the process.
Yeah, I think the opportunity, like, you don't necessarily have to expand this group to include business owners, but they should absolutely be targeted. So the visioning exercise should not be just this group.
Right.
So the
Right.
visioning exercise should be with the general public. So you should get as many people to be part of that conversation as possible. And like I said, you could invite 200 people and only 40 will show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everybody on the committee is clear as to how the scope of work is going to change from what, we had approved at the last meeting. So I'm just confirming basically that we'll go from 2 visioning sessions to 3, and there'll be something additionally included in there, emphasizing the fact that we want to get community involvement, in certain points of the process.
Right.
Other than that, the statement of work will pretty much look as it came out of our last committee meeting.
Yeah.
And that'll be what will go forward. It'll be worked into the RFP. So are there any comments or questions about that? Or if not, we can just assume Lori can go ahead and make those changes on the way to getting the RFP ready to go out.
Yeah, I'm
Looks like-
gonna, if I can, echo what Lori said. It doesn't matter if it's a town or a city or a building or a company. When we do the visioning or programming is what we call it, we can go to the owners of a company and get everything they want, but we always really highly recommend we go to as far down the chain of command as you can to the people doing the actual work. Because 2 or 3 things happen there. Number one, they're not getting something stuffed down their throats. Number 2, you are allowing them to participate, whether you do what they want or not. We may have some gas stations downtown that want more, and we may have to say, I'm sorry, we're not going to put another one in, but at least you listen to them. But then what happens is it becomes our project, not yours or the boss's. And they really do embrace it, and you'd be amazed at how many good ideas they have, because they're the ones actually on the street or at the machine or at the computer doing the work. So that's kind of across the board, I think, the right way to do it. And I would never want to do it with just us, even though we're obviously smarter than anybody on the planet. But it just, that buy-in and that seeking of information from the end users and really our customers, because that's who we're serving is the town, the people that live here, is really important. I echo that because we've done it so many times, and you'd be amazed when the folks at the bottom level, the end users get buy-in. The success is amazing because they will help you not make mistakes. And my dad used to say, I'd rather have 1 person working with me than 3 people working for me. And I think that's what we're really looking to do here. So good job, Lori.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is, of course, they will identify, they're really important for identifying the problem areas that nobody else knows about. Like they may say, hey, this in particular, this area of sidewalk is a huge slip hazard because the drainage is not functioning properly. And that actually happened with our phase 1 design. So the florist had identified that this area in between her building and the building next door, which had been covered in concrete years ago, was like a major drainage channel. And it was causing all sorts of problems because it was going across the sidewalk and then going diagonally across the street, straight into the Blackstone River, which is quite polluted. So we ended up creating this drainage solution and then diverting all that flow into a rain garden. So it was actually a really helpful comment that she made. So just an example of how that can work.
Well, I guess you can go ahead and make those changes to the statement of work, and we'll look forward to it, getting rolled out eventually.
All right. So I'll do that
Awesome.
this week and send it off, as soon as John authorizes me to do so.
Yeah, great. All this talk, I really just want to get down to it. So it's so exciting. All right. And just to, I think we talked about this today, and I just wanted to reiterate, was it clear that we will have to wait until after town meeting to put it out, or is it something that might go out prior to town meeting? We might just have,
My understanding is the funding to pay the consultant has got to be approved at town meeting. So I think John said he would not send the RFP out until the town approved the funding to pay the consultant that would be hired.
okay, so we have a few months still until it gets released. Okay. Just wanted to make sure everybody kind of knew that. Next on the agenda was an update on status of complete streets. I know, Lori, you had driven around with Scott, kind of talking about that, but I don't think there was anything new or any updates on that, except that you've been through the program before, and you might be working with Scott to kind of on the next steps of public outreach and prioritization planning. Is that basically
Yes.
it?
Yeah, so my experience in Millbury was that we created a complete streets committee. And then we ended up getting a technical assistance grant. So that's part of the Complete Streets program. So they have grants available for you to hire consultants to help you with the process, which is certainly what I would recommend in this circumstance. So Central Mass Regional Planning is one of the consultants, but there are a whole host of them. And sure, in fact, I'm sure VHB is probably on the consultant list. And then the consultant provides you with a variety of different resources. So they do like a sidewalk analysis. So they identify the quality of all of the sidewalks that you have in town, where there are ramps that are non-compliant with ADA, where there are missing crosswalks, and where there are gaps in the sidewalk network. And they do the same with the bikeways. So they identify potential bike routes with the committee. So of course the committee, and I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen here, like with the committee. I don't know if the committee's already been formed or hasn't. So I'd have to talk more with Scott about that. And then there's also a public process. So once in Millbury, we had a list of about 40 different projects that we had identified as needs. And then it's up to the visioning process or the public process to identify the top priorities. And the Complete Streets program, so pretty much every community is guaranteed $400,000. So that could be used to fund one project, or it could be used to fund several projects. In Millbury, we funded 2 aspects of our downtown revitalization project, so phase 1, phase 2. And then you sit tight, because once they fund your projects, then you're kind of frozen. You're not allowed to get any more money for a certain period of time. It might be 3 years or it could be 5. I can't really remember. And then once you surpass that period of time, you are eligible for the competitive pool of funding. But pretty much we got into the Complete Streets program early on, and now there are so many communities participating, so they kind of put the kibosh on getting multiple grants.
I was mentioning to Lori that because we have a 5-year capital improvement plan in Northborough, that to the extent we can fund sidewalk improvement out of the money we can get in a Complete Streets program, that's one way to do it. We also have the opportunity, if there's other projects we want to do that need money beyond that 400,000, we can always propose to the administrator or to the finance committee that they set aside the plan to do some town provided funding at some point in the future and put it in the capital plan, have that come up for discussion, as they're discussing capital project in general. So I don't think we're limited, but the only work we can do is on biking and sidewalks is limited to this, what we get from the Complete Streets program. The town can also choose, at some point to provide municipal funding to get some of these things to happen also. So that's a role we could play as a committee. If we feel there are other things we want to do that are consistent with the plan, we can recommend that things get built into our long-term capital plan to fund them.
Yeah, and it sounds like, unlike, it wasn't totally clear when we had gotten updates in the past, what the process moving forward was going to be. It sounds like, and obviously Scott will have to confirm this, but it sounds like it might, this whole public process and the prioritization and the analysis might line up really nicely with the downtown plan and the other sort of work that we're trying to push forward with the master plan implementation, bikeability, walkability throughout town. So I think it's pretty exciting. It's a very small chunk of change compared to all the things that, we have on our master plan in terms of goals for walkability and bikeability, but it's a start, and it's exciting that, there could be this cohesion between the Complete Streets work and what we're looking to do here. So I think it's exciting. So
I absolutely think that when the Complete Streets public process comes forward, it's really important for the downtown project to appear in the top 4. So you might even want to split it up. So like I said, in Millbury, we have 4 phases. So we identified the individual phases. So, I think the phase 1 project, we weren't sure at that time which was going to be phase 1, phase 2, So the phase 1 project was like number 2 on the prioritization list. And the phase 2 project ended up being number 1 on the prioritization list. So that's really important.
yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful to know. It's a good strategy. Okay. Well, great. Unless anybody else has comments or questions on the Complete Streets work, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which was the discussion of the preliminary boundary for the downtown plan. So, sorry, it's a little loud here. So I know that we had discussed that the boundary will be finalized when, sorry, it'll be finalized when we actually get down to work on the downtown plan. But we had said might be helpful and kind of help move things along if we had a general sense of what the boundary would look like before the consultants come on board. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about tonight. And a couple of you have already sent in your ideas for what you think could be a preliminary boundary. I can show one of the items that Dario worked on. Maybe I'll show that first. And then Jean did a little bit of playing around with the town GIS. And I think he's going to be able to share with us kind of a little tutorial so that we can kind of use it ourselves and come up with our own sketch. And I think following this meeting, if everybody can kind of sit down and try to come up with their own sketch, then we can put that all together and really look at it for the next meeting. But before I show the items that folks had sent over, Rick, did you want to ask any questions about this or start the discussion off in any certain way?
Yeah, I was talking to Ashley and Lori about this a little bit. One thing I'd like to just bring up, not that I have any preconceived notion about it, but it'd be helpful just to see where we stand on it, is the thought that this walkable, nice new downtown area might be somewhere else in town than where we currently have downtown? And is that worth something, even having the consultant consider? You know, for example, if you think about where our Business West District is, down by where Romaine's Restaurant is, and the Fox Meadow little commercial park down there, there's some open land down there. You know, by thinking about having some sort of a walkable, nice business district set up in a place like that, it gets to the point where it's Route 20 is already headed south down towards Route 9. And so the whole Route 20 situation isn't as much of an issue in a place like that. So it's just, in my mind, theoretical, but I just like to get some feedback whether anybody feels, when we start talking to the consultant, that we want to analyze the possibility of locating this solution someplace other than what we consider the downtown, or whether people think that's really kind of out on the lunatic fringe and it's not really something that has any sense in reality. But I just want to get that on the table tonight before we start, talking about this in any more detail. So I'd be interested in people's feedback about that position.
So, all right, so this is Fran.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd want to take anything off the table because I'm not a planner, I'm not an architect. And I would love to hear what people like Gene Kennedy or Dario understand what it takes, right? Before I would even know whether that was a crazy idea or not. If we can get away from Route 20 and the restrictions with the traffic and the requirements, I don't see why not creating like a little village. But I mean, I think I would have to defer to the more professional people before I could form a real opinion on whether that's a wild idea or not.
Other input?
I guess, go ahead, Amy.
Oh, no, you can go first, Dario.
I don't think anything's crazy. So put that out there. A lot of towns have different sections or downtowns. I lived in Framingham for a long time, and they have Framingham Center and they have Knobscott, and they have little gathering areas that are, and one of them's on Route 20 or directly off of Route 20. And in all those cases, I'm trying to think of where they all were. They were still at major intersections, which I think Romaine's is. And then that's Times Square, so New York City could get jealous. But one of the things on the master plan implementation plan itself that kind of drove me to where I had gone was looking at all the things that we wanted to focus on or tie into the community. And in a weird way, I think out by Romaine's would be less expensive. I think it would be easier to do because it's not as congested as downtown, but it pretty much abandons our history. And if all the things that we were talking about, geez, this is where the town was formed, these are all the historical buildings, these are all the cool little parks, and then we leave that and put all our focus somewhere else, and it really is west of town, which may or may not benefit the people west of town. If you're going to Wegmans, I think that's wonderful, but it's a tough thing to do without like thinking that you might abandon our real roots. And it's okay if our real roots aren't worth pursuing. If it's just too hard to do what we want to do downtown, I would look at that as a plan B, but not necessarily a plan A, because everything I've read in the master plan wants to celebrate our history. And most of our history is obviously the older part of town, which is all of these buildings and the aqueduct and the Assabet River and Assabet Park and, the Common. Everything was more towards the center of town, for a better choice of words. So it's not crazy at all, Rick, in my opinion, because there's a lot of practical reasons why it makes sense. But that's really up to the rest of you folks. And I think the town, that's where I think Lori's comment of hey, town, would you like our new Main Street or focal point or downtown to be out there? And that's a temperature I've not taken with anybody. And, you know, I think even to Millie's point, I don't think anything should be off the table, but there's real important things to consider if you want to move that, because you do have the competition and you do, I think, abandon a lot of our history.
I think
Good comment.
too, sorry, Amy, I just wanted to mention real quick, this master plan came out of what the public wanted to see, right? We did a lot of surveying. We took the public's pulse. The residents of Northborough wanted to see a downtown revitalization. What did they consider the downtown? I wouldn't think that they considered Times Square the downtown. They want to see the current downtown improved, not a new downtown created. That's sort of my sense of what the feedback was that we got from the public. And I'm not sure it's our place to say, well, we're just going to create a new one and, you know, forget, you know, what you wanted to see. But that's my opinion. Sorry. So
Actually, I
Amy,
think that makes sense, because that's the part I don't know. If this all came from everybody and nobody said put it there, you know, you can come up with practical reasons, but you're really not listening. Then you asked everybody in a company, what color do you want the building? They all said blue and you made it purple. And then they're going to say, why the hell did you ask us? You know, well, this was cheaper. You know, and they're like, I don't care if it's cheaper. We hate it. We quit. We're going home.
yeah.
That's
I mean,
the
I
trouble
think-
you get into, I think. And because you said it, I didn't realize this was all a million interviews. But if people are saying this is what we want, I think listing would probably be the better choice.
Yeah, I mean, there was never any official boundary for what downtown is, no definition. And I think that's what we're kind of trying to figure out right now. But I think everybody knows kind of generally what everyone was talking about, what downtown is. I guess that was my point.
Once
Amy?
again, go ahead, Amy. Go ahead, Amy.
Oh, and I see the downtown with, you know, like you mentioned, those key places like the library and the old town hall. You know, the town offices could possibly move back there. And there are just so many key features of the Assabet Park, Assabet River. And even when the downtown was created, there was a lot of housing around it. You have Summer Street, School Street, and all those neighborhoods could bring walkability to the downtown. Like I used to live on Church Street and we walked uptown all the time. But if you get out to Business West, there really isn't a lot of walkability. There's like a couple, there might be one neighborhood, maybe not.
Right.
And-
And that's, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so then you're driving to go and walk around. And I do think it's a neat area down there that would be great if it's walkable, but I wouldn't picture it as the downtown.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what we hear is that there needs to be people for a downtown to be successful. There needs to be
Yes.
housing, and we have that built in where a downtown is already. That being said, I wanted to share my screen for a minute because Dario did share his sketch of downtown, and whether you agree with it or not, his process was, as he explained it to me, really helpful. And allowed me to think of this in a bit different way. Or can everybody see that? Let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. So kind of what Dario did was he went through the town generally and circled key areas, conservation areas, areas of interest, historic spots, schools, etc., and kind of use that to help him focus and figure out what he thought the downtown boundary would be. And it's a very interesting shape. And I think when we talked, Dario, you said, well, those tentacles are kind of an extension, but the core is the core. But I thought that was really helpful in kind of trying to figure out where this boundary should be. Don't start with the boundary, start with determining the items and the areas that you really think are core to our town and what should be included. So I just wanted to share that. And I went through, and I was on the town GIS earlier at Jean's suggestion, and I'll let Jean kind of walk us through a bit in a minute. And I used Dario's method, and kind of, you can drop pins as you're in the Town JS, and it kind of helped me to focus on what I wanted to draw in terms of a boundary. But Jean, do you want to now kind of talk about what you worked on with the Town JS and how you were able to figure out sketching things out? Oh, for some reason we can't hear you, Jean. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. That's really weird.
Low volume?
This happened to Kathy one time. What was it?
You know, that happened to me a couple of times, and it seemed to happen to me when I used the link. But if I came into Zoom, just putting in the meeting ID and the password manually, then the volume would work.
Hmm.
You click on the microphone icon, it pops up a list of mics, and sometimes the wrong one gets.
Oh, yeah,
I don't know if that's it. I mean, I have,
right. Try a different microphone, Jean. If you click on the up arrow near the mute button, there's a list of microphones.
Hear me at all?
Oh,
Yep,
Well, that worked.
You can hear me now?
yeah.
yes.
Okay. Well, just to go back to Fran's point, you know, Daru and I have some planning experience. Laurie obviously does, but we're all citizens of the town of Northborough, so everybody's voice counts. For my personal experience, I happen to have municipal planning experience in the city of Newton and the city of Framingham. When you think of Newton, you think of villages. It's very easy to define the villages. We had village studies and went through the whole planning process, and they continue to go through the planning process. Framingham, like Dario was saying, you know, there's the traditional downtown of Framingham, but there's also Knobscott, Saxonville, and then lo and behold, all of the commercial development came on Route 9 and sucked the energy out of all of those pre-existing little villages. So that is still, you know, Framingham's problem. What I see in Northborough is really highway-oriented businesses that people go to, and Route 20 that's expedited for people to drive through. You know, once you get out of Marlboro, your next stop is Shrewsbury and you're on your way. So while we have distinct commercial areas, the downtown, downtown west, downtown east, I think the challenge for the study is to bring, if we go with the downtown as we traditionally know it, is to bring the downtown characteristics to what was essentially a highway business zone. You know, that's characterized by the many gas stations. And I know we've eliminated the gas station option. The town introduced the mixed use option a few years ago, and that has certainly helped bring a combination of residential and commercial. So, you know, where the downtown is, I think it's more of a challenge to make it more pedestrian oriented by.
Oh,
You froze.
Okay.
Yeah, you're back. Yeah.
All right, so I will, it's also saying I have an unstable wireless access, so that I think may be part of the problem.
Mhm.
So in following up from the last meeting, if you recall, near the end of it, Scott mentioned the town has a GIS system, and it's something that is worth looking at. I took some time last week to take a look and see what the functions are. I got a sense of it. I shared that information with Ashley and Rick, and they thought maybe if I went through a brief introduction of the GIS system, it would be helpful. The point is that since we are really a planning committee, mapping and mapping systems are really one of the primary ways planners convey information, data, analysis. So the more familiar we are as a group with mapping, I think the more helpful it'll be as we try to proceed. I will try to share my screen now with GIS system and take a few minutes to step through what we currently have. So this is just the main page of the town website, GIS and maps. It's right there on the first page. The base map. It's very easy to use the mouse to scroll in, zoom out. There's also zoom in and zoom out buttons in the top left. Going up on the top right-hand side, we have several drop-down menus. These provide the main functions to the GIS system. The first one is search. You can enter an address, for example, and the system will bring you to that property and provide basic land use and property information. The second drop-down is a selection menu. And you can do several things here. You can click on a specific property and the information will come up on the left-hand side. This is actually the town cemetery. You see it listed and the property information is listed on the left-hand side. If you want to eliminate that and select something else, over in the right pane, there is a more option, and you can clear the selection. You do that and you're back to go. If you're interested in selecting a group of properties, you can essentially draw a boundary. If you went something like this, it would then bring up that particular group of properties. And then on the right-hand side, you have the property addresses. And you can also download that selected group of properties to an Excel file. And what you would be downloading is essentially the assessing information for each property, ownership, land area, zoning, items such as that. You can clear. And then one of the key features to a GIS system is to be able to provide different layers or themes of data and lay that over the base map. So depending on what your interests are, you can compile various combinations of information. You can color code them and prepare a map that suits your purposes. On the right-hand side, you see the various themes that are available. It's interesting because earlier in the week, I thought there were more than just the 2020 aerial photo. I thought there were some historical aerial documents there as well, but I don't see them now. You've got topography, open space, land use, recreation, even down the floodplain information, and then even voting information. So for example, if you were interested in open space, you would just open the open space theme and it would present itself on the base layer that you are working with. The open space theme shows a legend of various information. And then you can't quite see it, but there's a transparency bar that allows you to change the density of the colors that are shown on the map. So if you want to see what's underlaying the open space parcels, you can go all the way to the left. That essentially deletes, and then you can shade it as you proceed, to fit your purpose. And then, as with any GIS, you can shut that off, put on another GIS system, another layer, all with the base map information still presenting itself. Going back to the series of drop-down menus, there's a markup menu, and this is probably the menu that Dario used to draw his otherworldly downtown boundary system. But essentially, you have a series of drawing tools. You also have a measuring option where you can measure distances. In terms of the tools themselves, there's a text tool, so you can essentially enter, you can enter text. So I want to go back and delete all this. So back to the markup menu. So you can enter text. You have options to select the font size of the text. You can enter a marker if you wanted to pin something. You would have that. I don't know why. I still have some things that I pre-selected. You can draw a line. And as you can see, you start marking this thing up, it gets confusing very quickly. But if you go down to the lower right, the red remove will eliminate whatever it was that you drew, and you're back to square zero. And that's what I didn't do with the other themes. That's why they kept showing up. You can select a circle, and your options here would be the line width, the fill color, the color of the boundary line, and then you have an opacity option that allows you to determine how much or how little of the fill you want to show. So you can edit. For example, make it darker, more opaque, or make it lighter. You can do the same thing with a rectangle. Then you can do something with a polygon. So if, let's say, somebody wanted to define a study area for downtown, you'd start by selecting the polygon option. Let's give it a line width. You don't really want to fill because you're essentially drawing a boundary of the study area. So we'll make the fill opacity 0. And then we'll have, so we can see it, maybe a red boundary. And then you take the cursor and then start at one spot and work your way across. Maybe down to the Assabet River, over to Summer Street. Maybe you come down to South Street, up, come across Gale, back over to Route 20. Cold Harbor Brook perhaps is the boundary of the downtown study area. You'd work your way around and back to the starting point. So there's your study area. Then you could go back to text. Change the font size. And you've got a study area. Now, once you've done that, or once you've mixed and matched the themes, provided the text, provided the markups, provided the boundary, provided whatever information you wanted,
Oh, no, he froze.
He
He
froze.
froze just as he was finishing up.
I know.
This one is getting exciting.
I know.
I'm assuming he was gonna talk about printing.
can you see
Or,
that?
Yeah,
Oh,
we hear
sorry,
you.
Gene, you just froze for a minute. So
Okay.
you were, we saw you finish up the study area and then you were gonna say something.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
saying my internet is unstable.
Okay.
So you click
Great.
on print, then you have the title. You enter a scale.
Mm.
1 inch equals 400 feet is a good scale to match, let's say a downtown area. And as you can see, you create either a standard 8.5 by 11 PDF file, or you can create a larger 11 by 17 PDF file.
Hmm.
You click on create the printable map, and you're essentially creating a PDF file which you can save as a file, and then email it to Ashley and Rick, or email it to the committee, or whatever we wanted to do.
No, I zoomed way in. I wonder why.
See, the 400 scale didn't really
Oh, okay.
quite work out as
Yeah,
well.
that's got to be 1,000 scale.
So it's got to be different.
We get
Okay.
the idea, though.
But
Yeah,
that's
this
essentially the
is-
idea for the mapping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is super helpful because I've used the town JS a ton just to play around, but I have not even come close to touching all those features that you just showed. So that was really helpful. And I think I don't know what other people feel, but if everyone wants to kind of sketch out their sense of the downtown and send it over to us, then we can kind of compile them, share them with the whole group, and we can discuss them and try to see if there's overlap and consensus that we can all come to prior to finalizing with the consultants. But I think having these maps is great. I know John Campbell has already sent me one, and Dario sent his wild one, which is very exciting to see.
Hey, Ashley,
Yeah.
Amoeba.
can you pull that up? Because I
Sure.
want to just, it's not really an answer, but it's an illustration of a process.
Yes, and
I
that's,
think-
that's what I hoped I explained that.
Yeah, but I think if people, so, and unfortunately, I did this caveman style. I just printed out the map off the GIS, and I use this, it's a really crazy tool, a marker and some highlighters, because I'm not as smart as Gene. Although I do know how to use the GIS. It takes me so much longer. So I just scribble it and then I run it through our scanner, and then I pretend like I spent 3 weeks on it. But what the process here, and then I think for everybody else, however you want to do it, but I think even, Lori spoke of it. The information that was on here came from the master plan itself. And the big green blobs, whether they were green was like natural things, blue was historic. I took off the master plan as places of interest that we wanted to embrace, for a better choice of words, because I don't know everything about Framingham or about Northborough. And I put all the dots there to say, okay, that's stuff that we talked about. So we're not going to be able to reach all the way up to, Bisquat Park, which is the northern tip of Framingham with the downtown. It makes no sense.
Mm.
And if you look at this star or spider, maybe the downtown is limited to the body, but there was so much talk. You guys can't see my cursor, right?
No,
Which is
sorry.
fine.
No.
But if you look up at the aqueduct, there was so much talk about the aqueduct that maybe that is one leg
Oh, I see it.
that does get considered, you know, kind of, I'll say day one with the downtown, because there were so many reasons to tie to it
Mhm.
from everybody's, you know, thoughts. But I think what happens here, you put everything that we thought we wanted to deal with, connecting to the trails, connecting to the historic spots, connecting to the parks. And then you go back to the downtown, you define the downtown, and maybe it's the body, but then the legs or the points to the stars, when we do the downtown, we want to make sure that those can eventually be tied back to the downtown as part of the whole master plan. And it's no different than when Boston did the Freedom Trail to get to the Constitution. It's you know, it's a long distance from downtown Boston, but they made sure in their planning that it was eventually walkable. So whether we did bridges or roads or anything else, if we do our downtown, there are areas that were important, pointed out in the master plan. And for me, I kind of learned as I did this, I just put all the important areas down and said, okay, how can we tie these all together and eventually reach out to Ellsworth and McAfee Park. But 135 is a big part of the downtown, and so is Route 20 going both directions, and so is a little bit north towards Z and the cemetery. And I even forgot our first cemetery was on Brigham, you know, and I drive by it all the time, and I thought, oh, how cool 10 years ago. And then all of a sudden, that is a piece of our history. Is it something that's a focal point? Probably not. But can it be embraced and celebrated? Probably. So when I did this, it was more understanding the process, put down everything that you think is important, then see how it relates to downtown. And then it won't be a circle necessarily. It'll be whatever, you know, you think is our focal point. And the other part of the process is, this is one piece is the scope, which is what we want to do. Then reality sets in. You get to the cost, and then you get to the schedule. So you can put this down and say, geez, this is $20 million or $50 million. We're never going to do that. But if you put down everything you want, when you do hit phase one, which may just be, you know, putting some trees downtown or bulbing the corners of the intersection, we know that we can tie it into phase 2, 3, and 4, you know, 3, 5, and 10 years from now. And it enables us to understand that maybe we would do want a connection, you know, out to Romaines, so we can pull those two together. And I can tell you a little bit about, which was interesting, that you talked about Framingham. 3 big downtowns in Framingham were there for 3 different reasons, and it's kind of cool to understand why. The Framingham Center was there because that was the old coach road. That was the old east-west connection from Boston all the way to Oregon. And that was horses and carriages. Then the downtown shifted to what's the current downtown, which we call South Framingham. And that was because of the trains. That became the new focus of a lot of towns at the turn of the century, 1880. And then it went back to Route 9 because the automobile kicked out the trains. So those were the 3 things that moved the major downtowns. Saxonville was also tied to a train track, as was Knobscott. But our downtown had the train, the wagon trail, and the cars still remaining in the same spot. Those tracks never changed. So ours didn't move as much, and therefore all of our old buildings kind of hung out in the same area through the evolution of our history, where Framingham's moved like every 100 years as technology changed, the downtown moved with it, which is kind of an interesting thing if you look at how things move, and villages are created and abandoned because of, in that case, technology. And that's just how people lived. And I think the other important thing that Amy brought up is the availability or accessibility or walkability to the town with where all the houses currently are is huge. Because for the town to work, those houses want to be there. And in Framingham, those villages all had a lot of houses around them, so they could still kind of remain active. It wasn't like there were no houses near Saxonville. It was completely surrounded, you know, and it's interesting how you can support a couple villages or areas in a town, but that one developed, you know, over 100 years when, you know, you had no choice but to live in Framingham Center, because it was the only wagon trail going to that area. So anyway, this is not an answer, it's more a process, but it's kind of me just squirting out everything that I saw in the master plan, trying to say, hey, folks, and it doesn't have to be super professional. You could just draw a green circle. And if you're smart enough to use the GIS, that's just loaded with information and technology that just makes it that much easier. But all I did was print it out on an 11 by 17 and then wrote on it with markers and then scanned it. So that's the caveman way of doing it, but it still works. But I think understanding the process to make it simple on folks that don't do this for a living, you can just do that. And like Ashley said, she just started picking things and putting points down. Then you look at the points and say, how does that relate to the downtown?
Yeah.
But anyway, so this was all based on the goals that were on the master plan. But I just wanted to walk through that process real quick to just help people.
No, I
Thank you,
think this is,
Dario.
I think this is really good, Dario. I think it also
Yeah.
points out the fact to the rest of the committee that any way you want to provide the information,
Yeah.
you know, back to Ashley or to us or whatever will
Yeah.
work. If you want to use the GIS and you're comfortable with that, you can do that. If you want to print out a map and write on it. If you just want to send in some text and say, you know, I think the boundaries ought to be, you know, the following streets, everything that's inside of that, you know, whatever you're thinking about, whatever you're comfortable in doing. The main thing is just to collect people's impressions of what they think we ought to do and see what sort of comes out as where we agree, where we disagree. Once again, we're not going to tell the consultant, this is what you need to work on. We're going to say to the consultant, this is what we've been thinking about, but feel free, once you get into this,
Yeah.
to suggest what you think is best. So
Right, but having a
combination of things
general
going on
sense.
here.
Yeah, and that's what I was just gonna say too, Rick. Yeah, well, however you want to get the information over, do you want it to be a simple outline drawn on a paper, a simple outline drawn on JS? Do you want to include some pinpoints of things that you think are key and should be included? Do you want to include some labels? Do you want to include some phasing? I mean, I think just getting your opinion of what you think should be the downtown boundary, how you think we should try to focus things will be really helpful. And then we can compile it all. And when we next come together, we can kind of try to distill it and come up with one idea to move forward with. So yeah, Amy?
I was just wondering, like, since Dario and Jean and John Campbell did theirs, if they send it out to everybody, I'm just thinking about myself. If I read those three, I might see one and say, well, I like what John Campbell did or what,
Yeah.
you know, and then I won't have to draw it myself. Not that I'm trying to be lazy, but I hate to, you
Yeah.
know, reinvent the wheel if I see a plan and I think, oh, that looks great. I would do the
No.
same thing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to send those around if you guys are okay with that, and as a prompt and as suggestions for others, so that they can do their homework before the next meeting. Yeah, I think that'd be good. Jean?
Well, mine was more just an example of how to draw a study boundary. I didn't really put much thought into the actual boundary itself. I will do that for the
Okay.
next meeting, but don't take that as,
Okay.
you know, my last will and testament.
Okay.
And-
Yeah.
and
The other thing I
Ashley,
liked
just
about
for- I
Dario's,
just- I'm
Oh,
sorry.
Fran?
I
Fran's
just
been
want to
trying
say,
to talk.
that's right, just because I'm more of a process person, I'm doing homework and sharing information. Just remember, we're a public body and we have to be careful about violating open meeting. So
Mhm.
I don't know that sharing everyone so that you can then use that to influence your opinion is a violation or not. I just,
Okay,
I think you may want to check before we start sharing behind the scenes. And I
okay.
don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah, I think if it's only 2, we might be okay, but I'll double check. on that. Okay.
I think as long as we don't deliberate, definitely over email. Like, I
Mhm.
think you can send out meeting materials. You just can't deliberate them as a board via email.
Mhm.
agree, comment on or anything like that. Yeah.
Right.
Right, they'll just be
Mhm.
examples. Mhm. Yep,
I was
Jean
going to
Kent?
comment,
The
Oh.
problem number is a quorum. So if you just want to share amongst a couple of you, but it's also the decision-making that's the problem. So you can't be talking amongst yourselves and saying, hey, well, we're going to vote on this.
Mhm.
Okay.
I
So
was,
Rick
I was
and
going
then.
to comment
Jean.
on Dario's plan. I liked the tentacles because my view is that we've got two different topics from the master plan we've extracted here as being important. One is this downtown, which we're working on, and the other is this whole idea of transportation, improving sidewalks, bikeability, and the downtown certainly adds to that. But I think it'd be important that as we go through this, if we're defining like Dario did, connectivity to other parts of town that the plan said was important, that sort of comes out and gets factored into the thinking that's going on in complete streets. So as this priority list is being developed, some of these things get factored into the priority list. They may rise higher up or they may not. But as the priority list is being done, you know, we can be providing input out of part of this plan to say, as Dario mentioned, you know, connectivity down to the aqueduct from the center of town is really important. And even though the aqueduct may not be in the downtown boundary, you know, that the Complete Streets program ought to be seriously considering how we get connectivity from the downtown to the aqueduct or other places. So I like the tentacles can do that. So also don't hesitate in your own way to talk about tentacles if you think there are some that, you know, we ought to be considering along with the downtown.
Sure.
That's exactly what it made me think of, you know, there's a core and then maybe label in a different way these connectivity areas that I think are really important. Jean Cahill, I know you've been waiting to talk.
Yeah, I was very stimulated about thinking about the west of town and the east of town and, you know, what the village concept, you know, might be leading us to, what the future is going to bring for, you know, the unexpected ways that cities and towns develop. And just thinking about that and thinking about, you know, we lose opportunities, I think, with our kind of routine development. And maybe part of the master plan implementation process is really kind of seeing what we could have done differently and then applying it to the next round of development. So if the area of the west side does develop, you know, what are the best practices and kind of things that we can build into it to ensure the walkability and connectivities and all those good values kind of develop around that new town center. So rather than building that or planning for that, more like anticipating what really would make a future development work really well. I mean, I like where Dario's office is. I like the way that strip complex was done because they've included just some really nice elements. There is stone wall, there's really nice plantings, there's a whole lot of parking, but it just has a nice feel to it in the way that I think, you know, we just might be able to kind of help influence the future of, you know, what those elements are that we would like to see and how they make us feel and how they function.
Great. Well, it sounds like we have our homework and some really helpful guidance on how to do it. Thank you, Dario and Jean.
Yeah.
So unless others have any comments or questions or suggestions, we can just move on to consideration of the minutes from February. Dario?
I have one quick one.
Sure.
Well, actually, it's in the minutes. One of the things that came up in the minutes was who we go out to bids with. I've worked with VHB and they're good, but Lori had mentioned Weston Sampson. We're actually currently working with them now. They may be another vendor. I'm just throwing it out there if Lori was happy with them. If she wasn't, then maybe we don't. But you know, that's another firm that, you know, we could make sure they got copied on just because it's what they do. But I would ask Lori if it was a good experience with them or not, because, you know, it's just someone that we know would be credible. And if she serves as a reference, that's all the better as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think if Lori, if you have any suggested consultants or anybody else that has worked with groups that you think are good, then we should definitely ask for the RFQ to be sent out to them?
Yes, so the main contact that I worked with on phase one at Weston and Sampson was a man named Michael Moonen. He's a landscape architect who I understand was involved with the design of the Common in Northborough. He actually left and went to a new firm called BL Companies, and I followed him to the for the phase two project. So we wanted the continuity of design. So we went with BL Companies, and I am equally satisfied with his work since he moved to BL Companies. So I would absolutely recommend both Weston and Sampson and BL Companies. So I think it would be great to send them the proposal and see what they can do for us.
Yeah, I think that's great to get more people with the RFPs, especially if someone's got experience with them. It doesn't mean they get it, but at least, it's someone that you say, oh, good, let's make sure they at least look at it. Hopefully they'll propose. People are very busy right now, which is probably, Lori, why your project went over budget between the supply chain and everything else. It's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's kind of the real world.
I think make one more comment about how I started this whole discussion tonight. My feeling is when you get a group of people together to talk about something, the more you can sort of expand the scope of what you're going to talk about and raise some issues that may have little practicality, but cause some discussion to happen. Sometimes things pop out that you don't expect, kind of thing. So I had no ulterior motive in mind for suggesting we think about Business West or anywhere else in town, except to say we're at the beginning of the process. And in my mind, kind of anything goes. And also to get some clarity as to, what we're going to be with a consultant. So you may see me do this from time to time again. It's only that I think sometimes you get some things out of discussions if you kind of open up the box a little bit more. So that's all I had in mind when I suggested that.
Yeah, no,
I'll probably continue to do that.
that's great, Rick. And yeah, I mean, it's about what you feel and what you think is the best for the town. And if there was, more than half of us that came back with the outline that was Times Square, then, maybe, maybe we, change our focus. So yeah, it's always good to think out of the box and keep your options open. And so.
Well, the other thing too is, let's say we focus on the traditional downtown and we come up with some ideas and some concepts. That doesn't mean that they're not transferable to other parts of the town. I mean, we are victims of a highway system that predates all of us, Route 20 being a primary east-west highway. And that is sort of counter to any downtown. All you have to do is go to Marlboro to see what they did. They had to do a bypass of Route 20 to maintain their downtown. So whatever we come up with in terms of increasing walkability, increasing the number of people, the ambience, the architectural and landscaping improvements, if they're good for one downtown, they're good for downtown west, downtown east, or however we want to apply it. So that's another way of looking at the tentacles, in the sense that, we're going to focus on a certain area, but we have other aspects of town that we are interested in improving.
Yeah, I think that gets back to what Gene Cahill was saying, let's learn from this. Let's create a model that, if suddenly Business West becomes really developed in 10 years, then let's do it right and learn from what we're doing here. So
I think one more thing I would suggest, I'm sure people do this, but the last couple of days, I've just gone downtown and just walked around.
Yeah.
I just sort of stumbled on some things I'd forgotten about, whatever. So I think, as well as getting a map and drawing lines on it, to the extent we could all get down there and spend some time and sort of wander around, that would also be helpful.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, Rick. I went down by Coldbrook, where Coldbrook met the Assabet, and didn't realize we had this beautiful waterfalls on Hudson Street. And then it goes under this warehouse, and then the confluence of those two rivers are kind of hidden in the back. And it was just gorgeous. And I literally just walked all around everywhere looking at it and said, wow, this could be really awesome. So I have been intentionally trying to explore, and there's nothing like, tripping over something or looking at square in the eye. And even where the Assabet goes under Route 20, there's that building that's right on the falls.
Yep. Yep.
So here's Dario looking at the building saying, boy, what would I do? And it's awful that we can't celebrate. We've got several of these waterfalls, that are, 100 years old or more. And I'm looking at that building. How cool would that be to keep the front of the building the same and make the back and the left-hand side all glass and open to the waterfall, so that you could just sit there and enjoy that water and that sound and the instead of this just sitting there as just a building to enjoy it. There are like so many cool opportunities with a lot of the stuff that we have that we really haven't capitalized on. The aqueduct being, if you had to make that today, you're talking, $10-15 million, and we got it there for free. And it's beautiful. Even a blind photographer couldn't take a bad picture of it if you're looking at it in front of the water reflecting. It's so gorgeous. And there's real opportunities with some of this stuff. But when you get out and look at it, like you said, you'll see good and bad, but you're really smelling the roses at that point.
Potential.
When I was walking around today, I walked behind the fire station. I never walked behind the fire station before. Well, it turns out behind the fire station parking lot, there's a beautiful overlook of Cold Harbor Brook as it just goes past the bridge on Church Street.
Yep.
And that could be a beautiful spot to do a little, and that's public property right now.
Yeah.
That could be a beautiful little park or something. There might be a walkway back to Church Street. Now, who knows? But I never walked behind the fire station before, and I just stumbled on that, so who knows what else we'll stumble on.
And I know that that's one of the things we have in the RFQ, right, is the sort of a field trip. So we can all do that and really get an on the ground look and really make this decision about what we should really be focusing on when we're down in it. So.
Just one more thing. I know you go through downtown every day, and there's a handful of properties you drive by and you say, well, what's going on with that property? And I'm sure we all could put a list of 5 or 6 properties. And my wife keeps asking me, well, what's going on? Why aren't you figuring that out yet? So at some point, as a committee, I think we have to have a understanding of sort of where things are going with some of these properties that are still vacant, as in vacant buildings, but also still vacant as in vacant land. And those are all key properties that can really help drive the direction that we want to go in.
Yep. Agreed. Yep. Great. All right. Well, does anybody want to make a motion or does anybody have any comments or edits on the minutes from February? Dario?
I only have, there's only one, I think, typo on page 1. I don't know who has it in front of them.
I do.
Okay, second to the last paragraph on the far right, when the RFP goes out to bid, comma, is that allowed? Was the question, not as. It was a question. And then on page 3, second to the last paragraph, where it was quoting something I had said, it depends on the very last sentence. It depends on where you are. And what I meant was with respect to the availability of utilities, the cost with respect to the availability of utilities, meaning where you are. If we were trying we were talking about about the green stuff, and if we have the availability of the utilities to facilitate it would read, it depends on where you are with
Actually,
respect to the
I don't know
availability.
where, I don't know where you are, Dario.
it's actually
I'm sorry.
page 4. It's actually page
Page-
4.
Page 4.
Above local planning assistance, CMRPC, the paragraph before that.
Mhm.
Starts off, Mr. DeMar said,
Yep, it doesn't
Okay.
work.
okay, so at the bottom,
Yep,
it says, it depends on where you are. And should read with respect to the availability of utilities.
why can't I find this?
It doesn't say with respect to, I'm adding in with respect to.
Page 3.
Yeah, it's
Page
page
last
3
paragraph.
on my version.
Oh, it's on 4 on mine, sorry.
Oh, God,
It's
I'm not seeing it.
do you see where it says local planning assistance?
Yep. It depends
The
on where you
paragraph
are.
before that.
Got it, found it. Depends on where you are.
Okay, it depends on where you are with respect to the availability of utilities, the cost of utilities, and the utility source. And that part was missing.
Okay,
Because we don't want a utility source that's burning oil. We'd rather have something, the source that supports it, that's a green source.
right, all right. that makes sense.
That's my whole point on that. That's all.
Okay,
That's all I have.
all
So
right.
that's what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Got it. Anyone else?
I just thought that it might help, and again, my paging might be different, but it's on mine, it's there, some clarification might be it's on mine on page 3. So it's a Mr. Campbell said this committee, where can I?
Okay, found it. Yeah, page 3. Mr.
And I
Campbell
think
said-
it's helpful to clarify which committee, because in the 2 to 3 paragraphs above, they're talking about the whether it's a housing authority or it's talking about a couple of different committees, organizations, or I just thought it might be helpful to clarify that the intention was
Okay.
the master plan implementation committee.
Okay,
And
You
then
could
it
just
says
replace, yeah, okay.
that they can move forward, that they can, the end of that sentence, there should be they can move forward on our own.
okay, yeah,
Kind of a disconnect on
yeah,
just
all right.
small
There's a
things.
big-
That was it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. That's it.
Yeah, that's tricky. Okay. All right, well, we'll play around with that, but, all right. Great.
I guess I move then that we accept these minutes as amended.
I
Second,
second.
All right. Do we need a roll call vote on this? I can never remember.
yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. All those in favor? Amy,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Dario,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Jean Kennedy,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Jean Cahill.
Aye.
Ashley, aye. All right, approved. Great. I think that's all we had on the agenda, unless anyone else had any other topics that you wanted to bring up before we adjourn.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, let me do another vote, just saving these minutes so I don't forget. Amy,
Aye.
Rick,
Aye.
Dario,
Aye.
Millie,
Aye.
Jean Kennedy,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Fran,
Aye.
Jean Cahill,
Aye.
Ashley, aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thanks,
Good meeting.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Happy
Have a
St.
good
Pat's.
night.
Happy
Oh
St.
my
Pat's.
gosh.
Aye.